Should you copyright a book before publishing? Depends. I know this is everybody's favorite answer for me. Depends. I sound like a lawyer. Depends. Well, we're going to talk about copywriting your book in general. So this is going to be a pretty good overview of what you can expect from registering a copyright, why you would register copyright, and more importantly, what the heck is a copyright anyway? So make sure you stay tuned to today's podcast. What's shaking? It's Dale here, and I'm just tickled to death. You took a little bit of time out your day to spend a little time with me to talk about my favorite thing, self-publishing. And if it weren't for the fine folks and the sponsors that help keep this podcast afloat, I don't know what we'd do. So that's why I want to give a big shout out and thank you and pay the bills here with the fine folks over at winningwriters.com. And they are now announcing and almost wrapping up the 7th North Street Book Prize competition. Enter for your chance to win up to $5,000 in cash and additional prizes. Not to mention, by the way, there's 6 categories you can put your book into, and first place gets $1,000 in cash and additional prizes. This is good for all self-published books, regardless of your release date. I became aware of Winning Writers some time ago, but when I found out that Winning Writers was actually endorsed by the fine folks over at the Alliance of Independent Authors, they got my attention. Not to mention that the North Street Book Prize is also recommended by Ally. That part is really cool. But what if it's not a good fit? Well, there's a really nice new feature that they put in here that any of the North Street Book Prize judges, if they see that a book is not categorized well, they will recategorize it at no extra cost to make sure that you really increase your likelihood of winning. And listen, if it doesn't work out at all, they will refund you altogether if it's not a good fit. Listen, the deadline is June 30th, 2021. In fact, you're listening to this podcast. It was done a week early because I wanted to let you know about this deadline. You didn't miss out on it. All right. Go to winningwriters.com/Dale21 today to make sure that you enroll your book ASAP. You've only got a couple days left here as I'm recording this, and you only have today to get it done if you're listening to this on the podcast. Disclaimer, folks. I'm going to get into talking about copyright. I am not a legal professional. I don't even play one on television. You're going to want to consult a business attorney for advice specific to your publication and region, but I'm going to give you some broad strokes when it comes to copyright. And a lot of this is going to be applicable to the United States, but you can take some of this information and apply it to the region in which you are in. Let's start out with what is a copyright. I know this is like the old Vince Lombardi statement of, this is a football. I'm going to strip it down to the fundamentals because not too many people realize that a copyright, what is it? All right, I've looked up a couple of definitions. And please just endure this for just a second here because we need to understand what a copyright is and what are the implications. It is the exclusive legal right given to an originator or an assignee to print, publish, perform, film, or record literary, artistic, or musical material, and to authorize others to do the same. Now, I've gone to another source because I feel like it didn't quite cover it enough there, and I think it was one of the dictionaries. Could have been Merriam-Webster that I probably pulled that from. So this one I got from the ever-faithful Wikipedia. I know, probably not the best resource, but they nailed it on this one. Copyright is a type of intellectual property that gives its owner the exclusive right to make copies of a creative work, usually for a limited time. I emphasize that for good reason. The creative work may be in a literary, artistic, educational, or musical form. We're just going to focus on just the literary aspect of things today because I'm not going to be covering copyright for, musical forms and all that other type stuff. The part that had me really pay closest attention to that was better than the dictionary was the fact it said limited time. What is that time limitation? 70 years to be exact. Now, it's not just 70 years though, because if you go over and you visit copyright.gov, where you're going to register your copyright at, as a general rule for works created after January 1st, 1978, copyright protection lasts for the life of the author plus an additional 70 years. So as an example, I published my first book in 2014. The 70 years hasn't begun yet. Even though I have a copyright on that one, and it's been a handful of years, the 70 years doesn't start until I'm dead. So use that for whatever it's worth. Whenever I plan on dying, or when I do plan on dying, or when I do die, either way, 70 years after that death, before it then transitions over into the public domain, meaning that people can then start to freely distribute your work and not have to ask for the rights to distribute it. So, what's the deal with copyright on books anyways? Here's a very basic way of stating it. A good friend of mine from years ago, Tim Knox, was the one who kind of taught me a little bit about copyright. And I was like, nah, this can't be true. But it is true. I've done my deep research, and it says the copyright happens on your first keystroke, your first pen stroke. Anytime you have created something, you've taken it from inside your head and you've put it out into the world for it to be consumed in some capacity, whether it's just for personal consumption or for public consumption. Either way, as soon as it's created, you own that intellectual property. You have the copyright. But, big but on this one here, is it legally enforceable? Technically, no. And you're probably saying legally enforceable. Why would I need to be enforcing something legally? Because there's going to be some ne'er-do-wells out there. They're going to probably take advantage of your intellectual property and try to claim it as their own and, I don't know, put food on their table and take food off of yours. So you're going to probably need to legally enforce that. So I said, technically, no. Why is that? Well, the burden of proof lies on you, because if you decide to take somebody to court because they have violated your copyright, that they have used it in some capacity, maybe they pirated the stuff, the burden of proof lies on you that you have that. Now, enter copyright registration. I'm going to get to some of the poor man copyright type things, and I'll talk about that in just a second here. Courts will require your copyright registration before you file suit. So before you even try to step foot into a courtroom or even get a hold of your lawyer, it's probably a good idea if someone is stealing your work, file a copyright ASAP, because you're going to need that as proof. Sure, there are digital timestamps that you can do, say through Microsoft Word or maybe over on Google Docs or any form that you're doing it. There might be a digital timestamp, but we're now in the day and age that we can pretty much finagle just about anything that we want to without that digital timestamp. So is it going to be upheld in a court? Remains to be seen. You need to even have visual proof of your work. Sure. So let's just say, for instance, I've done live writing sprints and some people have watched me. That's kind of hard for anybody to refute the fact that I'm writing this live on the air. And then there's now not just a digital timestamp on the document, but now a third-party company like YouTube, or if you're doing Twitch or you're doing Facebook, or you're doing some type of live writing sprints and you're showing your work at that specific time, it's kind of a good... It aids in your case against somebody else. What? Is it official? Not really. You still need an official copyright if you want to go into a courtroom and enforce that copyright. So that, by the way, the live writing sprints and such like that, that's not my legal advice. I'm not telling everybody to go on air and start writing everything online as visual proof that you're creating all the stuff yourself. Again, I think the best way is to actually file the copyright. Okay, so what happens? What happens if I find someone pirating my work? In most instances, on websites such as Amazon KDP, you have the option, and other book distribution, easy for me to say, book distribution sites, that you can go ahead and file what's called a DMCA takedown notice. Most times you'll be able to find some sites that actually have a link to DMCA takedown notices. Worst case scenario, you just reach out to support and ask them, hey, where do I file my DMCA takedown, and give them the specific link. The next thing would probably be if you see somebody distributing through, say, their own website or something else like that, you can actually send a cease and desist. And at that point, you're probably going to want to have your copyright registered if you haven't already had it, and you're going to need to get a lawyer that's going to be able to get all the proper paperwork together, because based on where the violation is at in the world, you're going to need to get specific legal advice. So for instance, here in the US, probably going to be very basic boilerplate type cease and desists. But if it's in another region, you're going to probably need to look into their specific laws that are governed over copyright and coverage on that area. Can you enforce a copyright internationally? My opinion, yes. But how well would it be followed through with remains to be seen, because there's going to be some language barriers and some distance barriers that's going to be really, really tough. So just trying to reach out, let's say, for instance, you have an author that steals your stuff over in, I don't know, we'll say Ukraine. You're going to need to find some way to legally reach this person to be able to bring litigation to them. And that's going to be kind of tough. And if you got a deep pocket, sure, this is going to work out. Someone like Nora Roberts can probably be able to crush it. Someone like Dale L. Roberts, I'm going to have to rely on help with some few friends in order to actually cover those expenses. The big question here, this is where I think a lot of people get really hung up. If you've got a copyright and someone decides to use a portion of your work, does it fall under fair use? Meaning, are they able to use this so long as it's short and has some type of context and they put something of their own flavoring into the actual content? You see it a lot through YouTube, where you watch a YouTube video where someone's reacting to another video. And that's considered fair use because they're coming in and creating something completely different artistically about it. That's not to say, though, that you can go over and, let's say, for instance, find a best-selling book and then start to just create an entire book full of reactions. There is some limitations to fair use. And to be honest, this is just a U.S. copyright law. Fair use is not as wide-reaching as you would think it would be. The doctrine that brief excerpts of copyright material may, under certain circumstances, be quoted verbatim for purposes such as criticism, news reporting, teaching, and research without the need for permission from or payments to the copyright holder. Whether or not 6 seconds of the song in a user-generated video constitutes fair use is something for a court to decide. So in the event someone pushes back on you and they say, hey, I'm using your work for fair use, I'm allowed to. The very first thing you need to know, first of all, if someone's taking your entire work that you have a copyright on and just publishing it willy-nilly, that's not fair use. That is outright theft. Fair use would be something like they take 1, maybe 2 sentences and quote you within their book. And I would think it's going to be up to you to decide, is that fair use or is that not fair use? Let's say that they quote your book and they say it in a disparaging light. Maybe they're like, Dale Roberts, he's just a complete fool. He doesn't know how to do push-ups. Why is he telling people that inside his workout books? Well, that's their opinion. And it is somewhat fair use. But if I wanted to, I can always just take them to court and try to test that fair use. You're going to find sometimes you're going to get struck down if you don't do your research in advance. And again, you're going to take someone to court, register the copyright. Hopefully everybody's kind of getting the idea here. So how much is a copyright registration? Again, I'm covering mainly the US, so we're going to get to international in just a moment here. In the US, it roughly runs about $45 to $65 or more, depending on the type of publication and content. So basic copyright registration for your ebook is going to run, I think, roughly about $65. If you go with electronic filing, here is the kicker. If you try to do paper filing, it's way more expensive at about $125. Yeah, they want you to fill out electronically if you haven't been able to tell. Now, here in the US, you can go with copyright.gov. That's more than sufficient. But what about internationally? So rather than me trying to give specific advice to different regions, because there's so many stinking regions that listen to this podcast, it would just be absolutely insane. I would probably spend the next 5 weeks just trying to tell every single region. So this is what I'd recommend to you is search for your region-specific copyright service. Make sure that it is a publicly recognized registrar, that you're not just going and registering with Joe Blow in Romania and he's going to charge you $25 to do it. Make sure that it is good. So I'm not going to file a copyright unless I go through my lawyer or I just go straight to copyright.gov. And to be honest with you, the whole process is fairly intuitive of doing the copyright registration. If you know how to upload a book to Kindle Direct Publishing, then you darn sure can be able to file a copyright with zero issues whatsoever. I got a couple final tips as we start to wrap up today's podcast, but I, of course, want to give a big shout out and a thanks over to the folks over at Winning Writers. The 7th annual North Street Book Prize deadline is June 30th, 2021. Submit your self-published book right away over at winningwriters.com/Dale21. Let me know if you end up submitting and winning, because that would be so super, super cool. My final tip, my final thoughts when it comes to copyright. Invest in a copyright if you know you can enforce it. There's a lot of indie authors out there. At $45 to $65 is a lot of money. Heck, there's some that aren't even making that much money in a year. So if you think about it this way, you can go and file that copyright. You can get it all set. But what happens when you see someone is actually stealing your intellectual property, that they're violating your copyright? How are you going to enforce that? Don't just tell me you're going to go find a pro bono lawyer. Sure, you might be able to find one, but will it get you the results you're looking for? Invest in a copyright if it gives you peace of mind. If you go, you know what, Dale, I'm just too nervous about someone stealing my intellectual property. No, I won't be able to enforce it, but at least I know that I have the copyright and not just a general poor man's copyright that happens when you have the first keystroke or when you just create the intellectual property that you have the copyright on. You got peace of mind. You can rest easier at night. Get that copyright for sure. For sure. Is it cheap? No. But is it reasonably priced? $45 to $65? Not too bad. Can't speak on other regions when it comes to the copyright. Hey, folks, as we start to wrap up today's podcast, remember, it's easy for me to say. I don't know what's the deal with me today here. Subscribe or follow me on your preferred podcasting platform and leave a review. And if you happen to be watching this on the YouTube podcast channel, yeah, we do this live every week. Go ahead and drop a comment for me. What are your thoughts on the whole copyright situation? If you got any kind of questions, please fire away. That's over at dalelinks.com/YouTube podcast. Become a subscriber. What are you waiting for? What's holding you back? Become a subscriber today. We've already got 1,500. We're on our way to 2,000 subscribers on the podcast. Till later, folks, I'm going to be taking about 1 week off from the podcast. So just know that there's going to be a little delay between now and the very next one, but rest assured, we'll be back in the saddle before you know it and enjoying some more podcasting time together. Till then, this has been Self-Publishing with Dale, and I will chat with you later.